Hi, I'm Reese. Welcome to this pre-workshop video on using R. This video will give you a simple introduction on how to use R Studio. I'll go through the basic concepts, some data structures, and most importantly, some commands which are related to the example that will be covered in the workshop, including reading, assessing, and visualizing the data. First of all, R Studio uses R in the background, but provides a more user-friendly interface, as can be seen here. R commands can be typed directly into the console window. For example, you can type 1 + 1, enter, you'll get an expression equals to 2. For this video, we will use an R script instead. So you may go to File, click New File, R script, and similarly, you can type 1 + 1. And in order to run this line of code, you can just click Run, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, which is Command Enter, to run this line of code. To save this file, you go to File, Save As. So I will save as test.r. So here I'll have my R script. So for instance, I can have maybe another expression, 5 - 2, and run it. This is 3. So in order to run multiple lines in R, I can highlight a block of codes and click Run in order to run these 2 lines of codes. So for demonstration purpose, I will use this R script instead. So first, we always want to clear all our current data and plots before we start running anything, so that there's no contradiction of the data. So we run these 2 lines. And so let's start with some basic concepts. So you type anything at the prompt. So for instance, 1 + 1, and R will evaluate it and print the answer. So for instance, 1 + 1, it will appear in the console. It's equals to 2. And similarly, if you try 5 - 2, it will give you a result of 3. And so these are 4 integers. So you can try to type the string, for instance, classification, and it will be printed right after your entry. And don't forget the quotes, because if you do something like this, it will result in an error. And similarly, if you want to print something, you can use the print function and put it in quotes and click Run in order to print the string. So next we move on to logical values. So some expression return a logical value that take the value of either true or false. So many programming languages refer this as the Boolean variable. So let's try typing an expression that gives us a logical value. So for instance, if you do 3 < 4, so this will give you true, and maybe another logical value, 2 + 2 equals to 5. And note that you need a double equal sign to check whether these 2 values are equals to 5. In this case, a single equal sign won't work. So this gives us a false. Next, we move on to variables. So similar to other programming languages, you can store a value into a variable to access it later. So we can type x equals to 42. So what this do is that it stores a value in x. And x, so now x is a scalar that contains only one data element. So you can also use the following. So for instance, you can use this equal instead of the equal sign. And this is the conventional way we do to assign values. So x cannot be used in expressions in place of the original result. So we can try x divided by 2, which will give you 22. We can try other calculations as well. So for instance, we can do x to the power of 2, which is x squared, or we can do square root of x, which is given by SQRT, bracket x. Or we can also try to reassign value to a variable at any time. So for instance, we can try to assign classification to x. So we can reclassify x as a string, and the string is classification. And notice that, so before I assign it, the value of x is 42, which is an integer. And after I click run, the value of x will be reassigned to a new value, and it's a string in this case. Next, we'll move on to functions. So functions are fundamental building block of R. And most of the time when we run R commands, we are actually calling and executing different functions. So we call a function by its name. So for instance, if you want to sum up different numbers, we can call out the function sum. And usually the function is followed by a parenthesis. So for instance, if we want to add a few numbers, we can try 1, 3, 5, which will give us a result of 9. Similarly, we can try to assign this result to a variable. So for instance, we can do y equals to sum 1, 3, 5. And we can then see what is y. So y is 9. So what this shows here is that we can assign the result of a function to a new variable. There's also a very helpful function in R. So if you are not sure about what a certain function do, you can look for help in R Studio. So for example, you can type a question mark followed by sum. Sorry. So a document will pop up in the help windows, and if you scroll all the way down, at the bottom of the page, you will have some example codes. So the quickest way you can do to learn an R function is to simply run these example codes and look at the input and the output. So for instance, you can copy this and see what the example code does. So this is one of the easiest way you can pick up the skills in using R. So we will leave 1.5 for now. We will come back to this at the later part of the video. So we will now do some data structures. So just now, we just focus on storing one single value. So you can also store multiple values in a variable or objects, and this is called a vector. So a vector is an object that holds a sequence of values of the same type. So the vector's value can be numbers, can be strings, or can be logical values, as long as they all belong to the same type of structure. So for instance, if we have a vector x, it means that we can assign x equals to C5, say 2, 22, 11, and 5. So here, C stands for concatenate. Now let's try to run x. Oh, sorry, I forgot to run this line. And you will see that x is a vector given with 5 inputs. So If you need a vector with a sequence of numbers, you can create it with the start and end notion. So for instance, you can create a vector in this way. So 5 is the starting number and 9 is the ending number. So this will give you a sequence from 5 all the way up to 9. Also, another way to try to make sequences is to call this seq function. So we can input, so from equals to 5 and 2 equals to 9. And if we run this, it will give you the same result as using 5 semicolon 9. So let's move on to some data assessing skills. So to find out what is the fourth element of this vector x, we can use x bracket 4, which will give you a result of 11, which is the fourth position of the x vector. And if we want to get the elements from 2 to 4, then we can just use the semicolon. And if we run it, we will be able to get the vector from the second position to the fourth position. Now, if we want to know the number of elements in the vector, we can use length x, which will give you a result 5 because there are 5 elements in this vector. So sometimes we are interested in the unique elements. In this case, we can call the function unique, and it will give you the unique elements in the vector. And if we are interested in the index of the maximum or the minimum, we can use the function which.max x, which will give you the position of the largest element, which is 22. And you can do which.mean similarly, which will give you a position of 2 because 2 is the smallest factor in the is the smallest element in the vector. So say you want to look for the location of a special value, you can use which. So which x equals to 11. So this will return you the position for the element with a value 11. So other than vectors, an object can also contain a table with rows and columns, like what you have in the Excel spreadsheet as a matrix. So a matrix is a two-dimensional data structure in R programming. So you can also consider a matrix as a vector, but with 2 additional attributes. So you have additional rows and columns. So we can create a matrix by using rbind or cbind. So here's an example. So you can assign M to be a matrix, and remember C stands for concatenate. So I can concatenate 2 vectors together. So here M is a matrix with 2 rows and 3 columns. And basically what I do is that I combine the vectors by row. Alternately, I can use cbind, which is column bind, to create another matrix. So for instance, I use 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 15, 3, 2, 1. So in this case, what I'm doing here is that I am combining the vectors by columns. 3, 4, 5, 10, 13, 15 in the second column, 3, 2, 1 in the third column. So this is why it's called cbind, because it's binded by columns. We can also combine 2 matrices together. So if I combine these 2 matrices, what I will get is a larger matrix with a combination of M and N. So we can also create a matrix by using the matrix function in R. So for instance, we can call the matrix function. So these are all inbuilt functions. So sequence from 1 to 12. So I specify the number of rows to be 4 and the number of columns to be 3. So X is basically a matrix from 1 to 12 and it has 4 rows and 3 columns.